All right, great. Welcome back to The Last Gadfly. This is episode 59B. This is called The Connected Class, and it's a continuation from our previous episode. And I think the last episode ended on Bill Wetzel.
It ended on Bill Wetzel, and it started with Chad Cherry. So he's segueing into this second part of the episode. Right. He's focusing on Bill Wetzel, who was a law partner at Plunkett and Jaffe, I think a founding member also. And that's also where another character in this episode, Pataki, the former governor of New York and the mayor of Peekskill, he also went to go work there. So there's sort of these connections that I think Clay sees and that we're putting together too while we're watching this.
Yeah, I mean, Clay's web, right? That's like a nice way to phrase it. Clay's web of conspirators and conspiracies, all getting wrapped up into one place now.
Yeah, and there's a lot of info online about where these people went and where they came from, but I haven't been very impressed by researching these people. Mm-hmm. Like, just for a matter of fact, like, Pataki, he is getting loans from the city of Peekskill to these real estate developers. It's changing the landscape. And later on, it seems like he's getting kickbacks and selling land back to these same people. It's just kind of gross stuff.
I mean, he's a New York politician,
Yeah.
I mean, all the reporting on it is going to be about corruption and bribery.
Yeah.
Wherever you are, Eric Adams, I hope you're fleeing the state right now. Another mayor being charged with conspiracy, or going to be soon enough, right?
Yeah, and we have tons of big names that are into real estate in New York. We know who the number one is. So I think it's all coming to light in Clay's worldview that you leverage your political access to gain stuff personally.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think he starts talking about Wetzel's fundraisers. Mm-hmm. Or, fundraisers, the way he likes to say it. Because Clay references these poker games and a lot of kind of underhanded, under the table ways of getting money to sources without actually having to declare like a campaign contribution, which there's limits on, right? I don't know if anyone's ever watched The Wire, but in The Wire, they have this scene with Clay Davis, who's the mayor at the time. No, that's a senator. The mayor at the time, where they have a poker game. And all the construction guys get together to have a poker game for the mayor, where they basically just lose money to him as a form of bribery. And I think that's what Clay is talking about when he talks about these fundraisers, these underground games, right? These gambling conspiracies.
And Clay claims to have access to some people on the inside. They think they've seen this stuff go down firsthand. Right. I find that pretty interesting. And we don't have the video quite yet, but we maybe even have a picture of some of these events at some point. It seems like there's a reference to a photo at some point.
Yeah, I'm not sure if he ever has it. We have to go through his records. But he really points out that Wetzel had a fundraiser for Pataki, according to Clay.
Yeah.
And he's asking, should judges that sit on a different branch of government than the executive branch, right, the legislative branch, should they be politically connected to the people that are the lawmakers and the people that enforce the laws, right? And should fundraising kind of overlap with judicial appointments, which is kind of what he hints at? I mean, the obvious answer is no. Right? But Clay is posing the question in this hypothetical. He always does that, right? He poses a question, kind of the Socratic method of questioning, poses a question, allows you to get to the end of it. And the record that we know, and I think Alex did a good job of stating this before, he's a judge. He was appointed by Pataki. And then the political favoritism that Clay talks about within the episode, and specifically on how Piero ignores a lot of stuff about it. And, he really meanders, but he ties in a lot of stuff together. Wetzel, Pataki, there's stuff that we tried to find, and we both did research on it. Alex did a lot more research than I did for this particular segment, and were you able to find anything for like any newspaper announcements or campaign invitations or finance records, or that stuff is kind of just in the breeze, right? It's really hard to pin down.
Nothing specific like that just like really clearly points.
Right.
But there is a New York Times article about how Pataki specifically benefited from these sort of connections he made as mayor, and then once he resigned, because he resigned as mayor of Peekskill, and eventually becomes governor, he buys a $700,000 mansion in Garrison. Supposedly, when he's a lawyer
Right.
working for these real estate companies in Peekskill, he's making $30,000 a year. It doesn't really make any sense.
Right. Yeah. And Clay did that research. That's how he came to light. That, or this was
I
through
did
like
that research.
Right.
Yeah.
So interesting. I wonder if that information was available to him at the time.
Yeah, I think it was a little after this episode.
Yeah.
It was like around like 2000, I think.
Oh, so definitely after the episode, yeah. And I wonder in the future episodes if Clay goes back, because we're setting the foundation now for what Clay has in the show. When we get further into the series, we're going to be able to kind of pinpoint and look back on, Clay mentioned this then, and look how his thought, has evolved from there, right? And where his thinking is now, and whether or not he comes and kind of like really ties up a lot of loose threads, which is something that I'm anticipating, And like we talked about before, Clay's web, right? It's really like Pataki appointed, was he helped through Bill Wetzel and his fundraiser? Is there political influence? What else is getting thrown back that we don't know about, right? I think you mentioned this before, right? That these people are connected on levels that we aren't privy to. It's all the backdoor dealing and, you help me, I help you kind of stuff, which is, it's fascinating to see. The gambling allegations really goes back to that constantly, that you're running a gambling hall or... Right.
Yeah, and it's significant because a lot of these loans that the city of Peekskill gave away, they were never repaid. So the city was losing $1 million or something like that. It's a big deal.
Forgiving loans, right? Yeah, just loans. Yeah, it's beautiful. A common way of doing that too is to borrow for projects that don't exist. Borrow for projects that go out of business. You form an LLC that's a nonprofit. You give a business plan. You get funding for it, and then a lot of the money for the funding gets tied up into research, gets tied up into surveys for the property, gets tied up into, environmental analysis. Right? If you ever hear any type of government project, they always have to stop and talk about, right, the environmental impact, right, studies and that kind of stuff. It's a really a very fancy way of slow walking a lot of this stuff, making it so that you can expand the expenditures, right, for what you have the loan for. And by the time the project's ready to actually break ground, the money's gone, the LLC forecloses, right? The not-for-profit, is gone, and all the money has been already funneled out. It happens more than we'd like to admit, but this is what we talk about. We talk about government graft, stealing. It's a very complex way of stealing, and it happens in stages, And they're very, very, very good at doing it. Once they're in government long enough, they know exactly how to milk as much money as they can from it.
Yeah, and I've been to Peekskill many times. It is a lovely town. It's beautiful, and it grew a lot probably out of these things. Like maybe net benefit potentially. A lot of development happened. It was good for the community. But if you're doing it in these underhanded ways and in this corrupt way, it's just not okay. And I think Clay was trying to prevent some of that stuff from happening. He saw a little bit of it in slow motion. And
I mean, what's happening today? What's in the news right now today? It's the reflecting pool, right? And Trump with his no-bid contracts, handing them out to that guy that looks like he's like a character drawn from...
It's like Wario or something, yeah.
He's wearing a double-breasted jacket. It's ridiculous. He has the epitome of a corrupt, Webster's Dictionary corrupt guy. If that's the way I could say it, very unarticulated way of saying it. But, it's happening now. It was happening then. I think, some people say this is not a flaw, but a feature of the government bidding process. And it's something to really always pay attention to. On a local level, it's a lot more difficult because these aren't gigantic contracts. But when you're talking about 10, 15 million bucks, on a local level, it's a lot of money. On a national level, it's not a lot of money. It's a drop in the bucket, right? But when you're talking about a small town like Peekskill, Briarcliff Manor, Ossining, right? That's a huge amount of money,
Definitely.
Yeah, definitely a huge amount of money. And the record that what we see, specifically football gambling with Wetzel, right? He talks about a source. He talks about having a snitch in there.
He does.
Right, which is something that I'm really looking forward to seeing if that actually appears, the snitch, right? We have the deep throat of Briarcliff Manor, which will be...
man.
All right, listen, all right, now it sounds a lot different, but just look it up, okay? This was a guy it was a Washington Post thing. Don't take my word for it. Okay. Anyway, we're gonna watch the next segment. The next segment has to do with a lot of stuff we covered earlier. I'm not going to spoil the lead for you, but I think you guys will really enjoy it because it has a lot to do with what's happening in the news today. So take a look.
Of course, once again, Jeanine Pirro has given short shrift to a victim who happens to be poor and of color and unconnected and not a celebrity. Like Pamela Smart, convicted murderess, convicted of tampering with a witness. By the way, Jeanine, you have these pictures up there in your room, up over there in the county courthouse building. Get this, folks. She's got a picture of Jeanine with nary a wrinkle, which is very interesting at the age of 45 or 6. Nary a wrinkle. Very interestingly shaped nose, according to my inside Gannett source. There might be a reason for that. Of her with the 50 most beautiful people in the world, which is a joke. And then there's a picture of her with Dr. Death, Henry Kissinger. By the way, Jeanine, why would you have a picture of yourself with Henry Kissinger, what he was responsible with over there in Vietnam and other parts of Southeast Asia? Why would you show prominently a picture of yourself, Jeanine, with Henry Kissinger, who has, on occasion, exhibited what most of us sensitive people construe as anti-Arab sentiments? I believe he himself or somebody with him at some dinner referred to the they purported the Arab mentality or some such. You who are of Lebanese extraction, Jeanine, I hate to have you do some heavy thinking. Karma? Instant karma is going to get you. Anyway, Jeanine also has a picture of Time or one magazine that says something pejorative about men or men any good or something like that. So I'm paraphrasing, but do men ever do anything right or something? I don't know, something pejorative about men. By the way, Jeanine, how do you feel about the fact that your husband, Al Pirro, has yet to acknowledge a 14-year-old girl who looks very much like Al? By the way, when's Al going to take the DNA test, Jeanine? That's a lot of child support that's built up, don't you think? Don't you think the 14-year-old girl, if Al Pirro, your husband, is the father, is a victim? And how about her mother? By the way, Jeanine, did you hear what that woman was told by Al Pirro about you, Jeanine? Oh! That's what I was told by a very reliable source. By the way, Jeanine, did you try to apply pressure like you seem to be doing all the time in regard to Clay Tiffany, investigative reporter, to a reporter down there on Channel 4 who had the audacity to tell the truth and go out to Indiana, Michael Hill, and do a report about this woman who has a 14-year-old daughter who she says was fathered by one Al Pirro? And by the way, Jeanine, did Al Pirro, your husband, have dental work done to obfuscate the fact that he possibly has the same kind of gap or something in the front of his teeth as does this 14-year-old girl? My, Jeanine. Are we starting to detect a pattern of two-tier justice under the reign of the imperious Jeanine Pirro, Westchester County DA, who's already trying to go for lieutenant governor? I thought she just ran. Well, the guy you're running with is a piece of work too, George Pataki. And by the way, why has George Pataki, why did he appoint Bill Wetzel, who had been a judge for about a year in Briarcliff with no illustrious history there? Why did he appoint his former law partner from Plunkett and Jaffe, Bill Wetzel, to a state judgeship, state court of claims? Huh, Janine? How do you feel, Janine, about the fact that my very reliable sources over there in places like Ossining, New York, tell me that Bill Wetzel was an open, inveterate gambler who lost and won thousands of dollars betting on football games through a well-known betting operation in a place where gambling is rampant. Just the other day I saw gambling being done openly in a bar on Croton Avenue in Ossining, New York, Janine. Okay? And the guy that was running the bets that has bragged about it over the years, that Bill Wetzel was running these bets, that's it. That's what I've been told by my very well-placed sources, Janine. This guy, Bill Wetzel, was running the bets through this bar, but the end bookie, according to my well-placed sources, was a guy connected with the mafia possibly, but that had been convicted or was prosecuted by and convicted, I believe, by the feds. How do you feel about that, Janine? Huh? How do you feel about the fact that Bill Wetzel, while he was a sitting judge in Briarcliff, had a fundraiser, according to very well-placed sources, including a notorious Ossining gambler and a member of the Republican Town of Ossining Committee, among others, were aware of the fact that Bill Wetzel held a fundraiser which raised money for the gubernatorial campaign for George Pataki approximately 3 years ago, right before the election. How do you feel about that, Janine? You going to do some investigating? We'll talk about that on a future show. And the carding industry? And the mafia? Janine? By the way, Janine, was your husband Al, was he ever hooked up in some capacity financially? Did he represent a mob-connected carding company? And by the way, Janine, is Al Piro leading a fight against the Mormon church over there in Harrison, the same Al Piro who represents Donald Trump with his commercial operations all over the place? And yet Al Piro is objecting to a Mormon temple. The Mormons, who don't even drink or smoke, they don't even drink caffeine. They don't exactly live the high life. It's not like they're going to have casinos like Al Piro's client Donald Trump does, Janine. Sounds to me like possibly Al Trump is representing some bigotry over there in Harrison. Huh, Janine? You stand aside with Arab bashers. You stand aside while your husband is representing people that seem to be discriminating against Mormons, who are very clean-living folk. Much more clean living is done at a Mormon temple than at a casino run by Donald Trump, which even has, get this, Janine, hookers and hoods passing through. What about the damage done to people that become compulsive gamblers? Huh, Janine?
So after all that, Clay starts to go back to Janine Pirro specifically. There's one instance where she travels to Israel, which is kind of interesting, I think, to Clay, because she's of Lebanese heritage. So, like, what does that really mean? Why is no one asking, like, what is a Lebanese person doing in sort of a adversary's country? I'm a little interested.
I mean, whether it's fair or unfair to kind of, assail her character the way Clay does it, he does it in a way of like, do you have no sense of pride? Do you have no sense of heritage? Right? It's like he's criticizing her for her background, you know, and that she's going as kind of a tourist, like a tragedy tourist, right? In an area where at that specific time, in I think it was 97, Israel had a security zone in Lebanon following the 1982 invasion. And their occupation there was super controversial. They withdrew in 2000 from that specific part of Lebanon. But I think that's what Clay was hammering on, you know, that you're Lebanese, you know.
Yeah, and apparently she probably had no problem being in Israel. I'm sure the people there didn't give her a hard time or make her feel unwelcomed. I wonder why.
Well, yeah. I mean, they want allies. And in that particular period of time, it's not the environment that we see today. Locally here in New York this past week, Mandami's 3 candidates that he pushed forward into the local elections all got elected. And all 3 of these candidates were campaigning on not taking any money from AIPAC and separating themselves from having that influence in our local and national government, because it's been tainting a lot of our international affairs. And now this is the first time, I think, in the past 30 years where the public is really shifting away towards support for Israel. But in this particular period of time, it was very much support across all party lines, you know. And it was very brave and very prescient of Clay to understand that there was a historical moment here that no one was talking about. And how dare Jeanine Pirro, right? How dare her with her Lebanese heritage go against the country, her birth, not her birth country, I'm not sure if she was born there, but the country of her familial heritage, right? And it's something that he really is offended by, right?
Yeah, and you can contrast that to Brad Lander, who is a Jewish American, and he's making a stance that he's just going to represent Brooklyn. That's his job. He doesn't want to take outside money or anything like that. He's just going to focus on his position, and
Right.
that's what we hired him to do, I think.
Being a local politician, serving the local constituents, you know. But he still came under a lot of fire, a lot of criticism. And I think that's what Clay's talking about. At first, it sounds like he's off on a tangent, but really, he's talking about accountability, right?
Yes, it's about accountability. It's about doing your job, doing it the right way, being transparent.
Right.
I think that's pretty much all of it.
Of course. And the reporters that he says failed to ask very difficult questions to Jeanine was something, I mean, he took personal offense to. He is a reporter. Like, why aren't you asking her harder questions? The human rights allegations that were happening at the time, since the history of this conflict, have been at the forefront of all criticism, international criticism. The torture allegations, the treatment of Arabs, the way he says it, right? Clay talks about, with his kind of verbiage, these aren't necessarily questions that every reporter would have chosen, but it really illustrates what he thinks reporting should be, you know. And I think that's an important thing. And he gets so upset too about it, you know. And with the softball questions that a lot of politicians are asked are ridiculous, you know. And I think we see a lot of this today, where we have these kind of fake media personalities. You know, we are podcasters on a very intro amateur level, but I would dare say our peers, right, other podcasters, I think committed an egregious error with this past election cycle, where, you know, you had people like Joe Rogan, Andrew Schultz, and a few others hosting politicians on their shows and not asking any difficult questions. And then kind of the arrogance too. I heard a clip with Joe Rogan talking about how podcasters and comedians are the bulwark, right? It's they are the first stop in stopping this wokeism and stuff, which is an insane thing for a really terrible comedian to say. I mean, you know, Joe Rogan is somebody that has gotten famous through his platform, but he's not like an intellectual. He's not somebody that you would look towards for any, you know, complex opinion. He's not a geopolitical expert. And the arrogance of him to say that he's the bulwark, right? He's where opinions start and stop, and he's protecting free speech, and that's a ridiculous and conceited and arrogant thing to say. And I think that's what kind of Clay was talking about here with reporters as well, except that right now we're seeing it right in front of your face, because the media has been really diluted down into these gigantic corporations that own the majority of the local stations. This is Clay is talking at a time where public access actually existed. YouTube now is kind of our public access, but the media landscape has changed so much, and yet the same problems that persisted then exist today. You know.
Also, let's not forget Jeanine Pirro goes on to be a talking head on Fox News. Like it all is a bunch of media failures of accountability.
Yeah.
And she knows just as well, or she will find out, you have to ask hard questions, or else you're just sort of a mouthpiece for the government that you really work for.
That's right. You know, and you know who had a good criticism, like a very good, I thought it was very on point. Zach Galifianakis. He talked about how the jesters, right, the comedians, they're supposed to be somebody that shines a light on satire, right? So shines a light on kind of this idiocy that's happening. You know, you're not supposed to appease the king, right? And in this world that we live in right now, we have a president that walks around like he's a king, right? He completely ignores the the judicial branches and the legislative branches, consistently.
Yeah.
And I think Clay would just absolutely lose his mind if he saw what was happening right now. And the web kind of continues, and he talks about this is something that we've been kind of waiting to talk about a little bit. Al Pirro.
Al Pirro, a attorney for Donald Trump, also pardoned by Donald Trump for, I think, tax evasion.
I'm not sure what was he pardoned, but if he was pardoned, that's probably exactly why, because he was convicted of that earlier on in his career, and he thinks that the public image kind of extends further than just one person. You know, it extends like his relationships. Right, you see Al Pirro, and he talks about how he's the lawyer, a mob lawyer, and that the businesses that his clients deal in are, what was it, casinos,
karting,
right? He talks about how there's hookers and hoods. He calls them hoods, which I love. I mean, he has this like 1940s type of verbiage for this stuff, you know, where are the hoods? And he talks, which I found not funny, okay, but it was, you know, I liked it when he talked about the paternity controversy, whether Al has fostered, you know, a child out of wedlock, right?
Well, we know he did. There was a court case where they made him submit DNA evidence, and we know that there's a third child in his family that is not one of Jeanine Pirro's sired children.
They got divorced later.
They did, yeah.
But at that time, I mean, things were nuts, absolutely nuts. And we talked about this in the previous episode or the one before, but how Jeanine was caught when she was running for office on a hot mic talking to the police commissioner about setting up her husband. That she was cheating on him and this and that. And that's sunk her political aspirations at the time, because it was a ridiculous clip that they got.
Yeah, and that's par for the course for politics these days in D.C. It seems like everybody's in bed with everybody. So
right, yeah.
I guess it was the same way then.
I mean, yeah, you know, it was 30 years ago, but it's basically today, especially what they're talking about because this isn't the only time he talks about Israel. It's not the only time he talks about international affairs. How many things are still almost in the same state of turmoil then and now? It's just really cool to see. Well, it's interesting from a historical standpoint to see. Obviously, I mean that from strictly a journalistic point of view.
It's not cool.
It's not cool. It's not cool. And I'm smiling out of complete embarrassment. Anyway, the carding influence that he talks about, you know, the garbage companies and the mob affiliations, he really hammers that in with Al Pirro constantly. Never talks about it with Trump up until this point. But by association, he's linking Al Pirro and his client, Donald Trump, and he says it constantly. And why Donald Trump matters to Clay is because he built a golf course in Briarcliff Manor. And that golf course, Clay talks about how he gets unfair tax breaks, how he gets preferential treatment from local officials, and who was a cop in the town at that time?
Nicholas Tartaglione, obviously.
Yeah, Tartaglione. Make of that what you will. The web grows larger, right? Clay's web, Pirro, Janine, Albert Pirro, Donald Trump, political influences. You know, it starts with the Wetzel and ends with the Trump. So there's a lot of stuff that he really packs in to that particular segment. And yeah, he meanders, but I think he's very poignant. He really kind of puts a light on the important topics he wants to discuss.
Yeah, and we're just opening this can of worms. So I think more stuff's going to come to light. Clay's going to keep going on and on about these people from Dirge to Dirge. So let's just keep watching and see where he brings us.
From Dirge to Dirge. Yeah, let's keep watching. So the next segment's the last one, and then we're going to follow up with our closing, kind of tying everything together. So enjoy.
Anyway, a Briarcliff High School student from a probably affluent home, white of skin, has his allegation taken up by DA Janine Pirro's office, even though his incident was not witnessed by the two referees, but only by his friend and himself. Now, I'm not saying that he shouldn't have his day in court, but his case is a lot flimsier, in my opinion. How about you out there? Remember, it was during a soccer game. One alleged punch was thrown, and a felony charge is filed against this working-class Latino boy, slight of built. I saw him. Whereas, how do you folks feel about the fact that, in contrast, Chad Cherry gets viciously pummeled over and over and over, at least 10 times, with much damage, much more damage than to the white, affluent Briarcliff High School kid, who justifiably should get his day in court. I don't know about this felony charge. And Chad Cherry doesn't get his day in court. And when I say day in court, I don't mean when ADA John Cherico tries to cut a deal with Robert Tendy, fellow Republican, the defense attorney, and plead down to a violation of second-degree harassment, which is not even a crime, because that's it's a de facto allowing him to walk. That doesn't do it. Oh, does that one go by you? Yeah, that's right. ADA Cherico was going to allow this to be pled down. Now, to a violation which isn't even a crime. To his credit, so far, Ossining Village Judge Barlam has not allowed this flim-flam to go down. He's run up now 2 delays. Now we're going to have there's going to be another hearing in early January. I will keep you apprised. But Sheila Cherry had to plea and beg, and then she handed a long missive to Judge Barlam, who to his credit took it, enumerating numerous things that I've talked about on my shows and that Sheila Cherry is aware of. Like the fact that the Tronchen family, according to Sheila Cherry and her mother, the Tronchen family and friends, and Robert Tendy have harassed Sheila Cherry about this over the months. And, according to Sheila Cherry, and a letter that obliquely refers to it, the Tronchens have tried to set up a trumped-up rape charge, which has absolutely no verity, according to the Cherrys, whom I believe, in regard to Corey Tronchen's sister, and use that as leverage, saying that they're going to file charges in Washington, D.C., no less, if Sheila Cherry continues to press charges against Corey Tronchen, who's been identified by numerous witnesses as the assailant in the vicious attack upon Chad Cherry on State Street near Sing Sing Prison on August 7th, 1997. Also, according to Sheila Cherry, she never told defense attorney Robert Tendy, a well-connected Putnam County Republican, aligned with the vile Sam Gambino crowd that just got recently ousted, all 4 of them, up there in Putnam Valley. Anyway, Robert Tendy was never told by Sheila Cherry, according to Sheila Cherry, whom I believe, that he had permission to tell the court that she wanted to drop the charges against Corey Tronchen. Yet twice in court on 2 separate occasions, Robert Tendy said this to Judge Barlow. That is what I call perjury. Don't you? How do you people out there feel? Do you think that a lawyer should also be prosecuted for perjury? Pam Smart, she gets her day in court. Chad Cherry doesn't. Gus Lopez doesn't. Clay Tiffany doesn't. Hey, stay tuned on this Tartaglione. Apparently he set his dog. Now he set his dog. Remember I told you about, I think his name is Robert L. Cerrone in the springtime, according to a Cerrone family source. Tartaglione set his dog while on duty. He did not have permission for the dog. Chief Trainum was made aware of it, which Chief Trainum admitted to me in a letter from Cerrone's father. Chief Trainum, what has he done? Now Chief Trainum says he can't find the letter. He can't find the letter. And Keith Austin and that abominable Board of Trustees just turned their collective heads. But I'm not turning my head. And by the way, thank you for the Ossining youths who told me that they had Tartaglione set his dog upon them this summer. 4 of them. 4 Ossining High School youths apparently had, according to my sources, good sources I might add, set his dog while on duty upon them and intimidated them. I guess, oh, by the way, I would consider this rape charge an immaculate rape, if you know what I mean. Another point of interest, ADA John Cherico neglected to tell Sheila Cherry that Corey Tronchin was up on two felony charges for a 7-296 gang assault upon a guy and a girl in their car by Corey Tronchin and 19 others. They caught 3 of them. Corey Tronchin on September 30th, 1997 in Putnam Valley Court, according to my sources, pled guilty to misdemeanor charges, probation and a fine, and a guy named Peter Engler and a guy named Rudolph Matt Sharon. Okay? Well-placed police source told me that Cherico's telling Sheila Cherry he wasn't aware of this former activity by Corey Tronchin that I apprised her of, called Cherico a liar. Now, Janine Pirro, you're going to have to worry. You're going to have to worry about who talks to me, because an assistant district attorney from your Westchester County offices told me that there's always a rap sheet when an arrest is made of a misdemeanor or higher crime. Fingerprints are taken, they're sent to Albany, and until the case is adjudicated, there's a rap sheet. Okay? That's from your own office. What are you going to do about this dereliction of duty by Cherico? Huh, Janine? One other thing. Mrs. Tronchin told Sheila Cherry, get this, folks, that they couldn't do anything about the 4 accomplices because they were 4 Yonkers police officers. I don't think it's true, but if it is, that makes it even more egregious, this cover-up. She told Sheila Cherry that they were 4 Yonkers cops that accompanied Corey Tronchin in the vicious assault upon Chad Cherry, in which Chad Cherry received a fractured nose, swollen face for a couple of weeks, jaw injury. They were worried that his bone beneath his eye was going to be was broken. He's got problems with his left eye. He's got pain from his back all the way down to his spine. That could be lifelong. He had a head injury. He had other injuries. Okay? I think that he's only got 1 life to live. Don't you think he should be allowed to live it intact, people? All right, on to Ossining and another tale, a woeful tale of a fellow named Deshaun Lissamore. Deshaun Lissamore, who's a fine young man, I believe he's about 19, black, always important in Ossining and Briarcliff, in most places. On October 26, 1997, Deshaun Lissamore was outside the Atlantic Bar waiting for a friend who had gone in for a drink. All right, is it allowable for a black to go in for a drink in Ossining, on the mean streets of Ossining? Is it allowable for a black male like Deshaun Lissamore, who lives right nearby, to stand on the street waiting for his friend? Was it allowable for Deshaun Lissamore to slap five, a form of greeting, that night with a friend? Because after that happened, two Ossining cops swooped down on Deshaun and his friend, and they swooped down and they said, they searched his friend. I believe that's a violation of his Fourth Amendment rights, because I don't believe they had probable cause. Oh, by the way, the two cops, Dave Edwards, we know about Dave, and De Benedictus. We know about De Benedictus, don't we? Okay? They found nothing on Deshaun's friend, and they told Deshaun to go across the street. But they didn't say, go across the street. According to Deshaun Lissamore, the police officer De Benedictus said, quote, Deshaun, go across the street before I kick your ass. Another brave cop. By the way, Dave Edwards, according to my sources, are they correct when they tell me that you are not endearing yourself to various males who have women they believe are loyal to them? Just a friendly reminder that your peregrinations are not as surreptitious as you think, Dave. By the way, Dave, I know you need a translator for the previous statements. I don't think you're going to find one in the Ossining Police Department. Despite the illegal admonition, Deshaun did go across the street. Yet, police officer De Benedictus, according to Deshaun, whom I believe over De Benedictus, followed, who's proven himself to be a liar. De Benedictus followed Deshaun and got right up in Deshaun's face, chest to chest. Then De Benedictus, this rogue cop, pushed Deshaun, and then De Benedictus maced Deshaun in the eyes with chemicals. These rogue Ossining cops seem to have a frightening propensity, don't they, for macing people, especially black and Latinos and poorer whites. Then either De Benedictus or Edwards, according to Deshaun, shoved Deshaun Lissamore to the ground and handcuffed this lad. While on the ground and handcuffed, Deshaun told me that police officer De Benedictus kicked him. How brave. How brave. Then De Benedictus arrested Deshaun and threw him in the car. All night, Deshaun's eyes burned from the chemicals that were maced into his eyes. Now remember, this started with him giving skin to a friend, slapping five. By a question, do you think that De Benedictus would do this to, let's say, some guy on the Knicks that slapped five as they ran down the court? I'm sure we'd like to all watch that. Unless the Knick was handcuffed, of course. I think even handcuffed, I don't think that De Benedictus would get into it if we could all watch and he couldn't use any weapons. Pusillanimous, baby. Deshaun made the putative Ossining police chief aware of this wrongful activity, and putative police chief Joe Burton has done nada. The young man was kept 19 years old, that's all he is, from 1 a.m. until 11 a.m. in the jail with his burning eyes, which were disregarded by the Ossining police.
All right, so after all that, the entire episode, why does Clay return to Chad Cherry at that point? Right, he's already talked about Chad at the beginning. Then he went to political stuff. Why does he wrap back to Chad?
Well, Chad isn't the only victim here. There's multiple victims. We have Deshaun Lissamore.
Yeah.
And we have more Catholic priest stuff
Right.
that Clay's talking about. So he's tying in, I think, systematic abuses from different systems.
Right.
There's the Catholic Church, there's the police, there's the justice system.
Right.
A lot of these abuses go unchecked, it seems. And I think he's kind of closing with some of these thoughts.
Yeah, definitely. But I mean, he goes back to Chad though, right? Because in his mind, Chad is still the center of that story, you know.
Yeah.
And I think he believes like he didn't get justice, and there's a lot of examples that he shows about people that aren't getting justice too, you know. And I think that's the thing. It's the plea negotiations he discusses there, which he thinks is unfair because he talks about why Chad Cherry didn't get his day in court, but other people did. He goes to the alleged intimidation, which was really funny, that segment where he said this guy from Yorktown was accosting him and threatening him, and he was like, you know, if you really want to do something about it, I'm paraphrasing here, he's like, you should do something.
He's like, try that again.
Yeah.
Actually don't
do that. He's like, I really want you to just come forward, which was hysterical. I love that he like sent the threat out and then walked it back, like even before he finished the sentence. And he talks really about this belief that all these cases were just mishandled, right? And reinforces the mishandling of it over and over.
And isn't Piro involved in Chad Cherry's case at some point?
Yeah, I mean, he says why she didn't prosecute that or why she ignored it, according to Clay, you know. Who knows what the actual elements of the case are, right? Who knows if there was enough to prosecute, whether there was material witnesses, whether or not even Chad Cherry would come forward and want to be somebody that is going to accuse them, because he's going to have to show up to court. You know, the process of justice is not a short one. It's very lengthy, and it could take a lot of people out of their element. He was a student at the time, you know, so who even knows if he had the wherewithal to kind of suffer through the indignity of a court case sometimes, right?
Yeah, and he's not trying to just prove one incident. He's just trying to show that there is a pattern going on. Like, this is young people, young African Americans getting beaten by the public and no accountability for it. And in fact, people go out of their way to silence anyone who wants to talk about it, like Clay.
Right. Yeah. And also the guy that tries to silence Clay too and intimidate him, which is really funny because he was talking about how he said he was an athlete in Yorktown and whether or not you could like piece it together. He really leaves a lot for the viewer to tie in. And then he goes to our reoccurring character, Senor Tartaglione, Mr. Nicholas Tartaglione. Why does he suddenly mention this? Because for Clay, it's another example of authorities ignoring misconduct, you know? And it's one of the, I mean, he talks about it before, but it's another glimpse into what the future content holds, because with Tartaglione, it definitely becomes the center of his subject matter in future episodes. After his assault and after things like that happen, which Clay is going to really deep dive into in the next episodes. But it's, you know, I like that he always has this warm place in his heart to talk about his favorite mobster cop, Tartaglione, even though if it's for a brief moment, he's there. And then he segues into Deshaun Lissamore, right? And he's introducing another victim. And like, why? Why would he do that, Alex? What do you think? Like, is he trying to prove one incident, or is he arguing a pattern? You know,
I think it's a pattern.
Right.
I think these are just the ones we know about, but
Right.
It seems like at this point we're aware that the justice system isn't working for every member of the society up there in Westchester.
Right.
A lot of the victims, like Pam Smart, she gets more media attention. She's who people want to have like the gears turn for.
Right. And and she's not a local person there, but he just highlights how the attention given to one case and not the other, right? And what the media chooses to focus on
Yeah,
Right.
and that was such a big story. I found out the other day there's a movie based on that by Gus Van Sant, To Die For, with Joaquin Phoenix and Matt Dillon and a few other people.
I
But
didn't know that.
yeah, it's crazy.
That is nuts. Yeah, I
But
mean,
there's no Chad Cherry movie, you know.
No.
There's no Deshaun movie.
and I mean, Chad Cherry has definitely a movie name. You know, it'd be very easy to kind of turn that story into really an example of the environment that Clay was trying to tell everybody. You know, this kind of racist environment. And like I think I talked about this before, when he's in front of the courthouse and the alleged cop yells out, "You got beat because you deserve it," and then Clay yells out, "It's this is Klan country. They don't even hide it, right?" So he has it in his forefront of his mind constantly that following Deshaun Lissimore's allegations involving the Ossining police, excessive force, pepper spray, mistreatment after his arrest, he connects all this to criticism for the police and prosecutorial oversight. And then tying back to deny, right? Talks about Father Gentile. And he ends the episode talking about that, and why end the episode with the priest again? It's interesting that is he like, he's never really with just one institution, right? He goes to every institution,
Yeah. I mean, I find it pretty important that these institutions, they cause so much trauma in people's lives. And sometimes the trauma manifests 20 years later. Like the victims waking up one day and having a flashback about their abuse. Maybe they remember this genteel guy from the 70s abusing them or something like that.
Well, I mean, he talks about that. He talks about Matthew...
Yeah, with Joseph Peters.
Joseph Peters, right, yeah.
Yeah.
And I think he mentions that towards the end of the episode as well. And the episode, this one, right, starts with the fundraiser with Bill Wetzel. Goes to judges, newspapers, police officers, priests, politicians, prosecutors, mob guys. I mean, it sounds chaotic, right?
Mm-hmm. It is really chaotic. It's a chaotic world. There's so much violence and there's so much trauma and sadness. And we're just looking at one little corner of it in New York.
From what Clay saw, right? But also it's like why he thinks that they're all connected. And whether he's right or wrong about any of those connections, we're here to investigate why he even thought it was important and his train of thought. Clay had a very interesting way of grabbing onto a subject and breaking the details down. And unfortunately, I guess for me, and maybe this is a good time to talk about how our feelings about when you're watching Clay, it's kind of like a narrator in a book, right? If you ever read a book that's in the first person, you're really allowing the first person narrative to unveil certain facts and kind of drag you along the story in a way that they're showing you what's important or not, right? And we're watching these episodes in a vacuum. We're watching these episodes without Clay next to us telling us why he thought X, Y, and Z and what he thought was important. So I think a lot of what we have to do is use our best efforts to give enough context to ourselves and to you guys as to what we think and why he thought that way, right? What we think he was thinking and what he's showing us, because there's some times where you just have to take things at face value, but I'm more interested in what motivated him to really highlight those things. This was an hour-long episode. The previous one, Deny, was a half hour, the length of it varies and really what he focuses on varies, right? And I think with this transcript, we're starting to see what I want to kind of call like Clay's web, Clay's web, how he ties everything together. Some connections are documented, some are allegations, some remain unanswered, but our job, it's not to tell you what you believe, right? It's to investigate where the evidence leads to. And that, I think, is the most important part of this show and why we're taking all this time to deep dive into Clay's tapes, I generally think that how we encapsulate The Last Gadfly is it has to provide more than just an archival feel for Clay. We have to tell you and explain what was happening at the time, because it's very difficult to understand what Clay was talking about without having the background of what was happening. And I think when we discuss it, it really provides sheds a lot more light on the things that, how many times did we watch an episode and we start off kind of lost, and by the time we finish researching it, we really see his train of thought, right?
Exactly, yeah. And like you were saying before, we're not here to tell you what to think.
Right.
Clay is very good at articulating himself. He knows what he's talking about. I don't want to really interject my thoughts on all the politics that are surrounding the United States right now, or the world. So we'll just let him do the talking, and you can have your own thoughts and feelings on it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Clay is pretty righteous, in my opinion. I'm a big fan.
I'm a huge fan, yeah. And I think, Clay, I think the worst part about Clay's, I don't know how to say this, his legacy. I would I think dare to say that, his legacy. We're gonna, throughout the years of having the tapes and the research that I did, there's so many people that hate this guy. It's remarkable. And I showed you a bunch of stuff that is no longer available on the internet. Those local websites that really talk so badly about him.
Mm-hmm.
Talking about how he was a thief, which is totally unproven, unsubstantiated. And we're going to talk more. We're going to have an episode where we talk about the background stuff that's not in Clay. It's not in Dirge for the Charlatans. It's really Clay's life story. But a lot of people hated him. And even when I first got the tapes and stuff, and I was talking to people, there was a lot of people that thought Tartaglione was, an honorable guy. Even after it came out that he had murdered 4 people, they still, there was such comments that were left on videos that the original Dirge stuff that talked about how they'd rather have Tartaglione than Clay. That Tartaglione is somebody that they respected, and Clay deserved it. It's crazy. For me, and I'm not going to speak for you, but for me, it completely threw me off. How could you defend this corrupt, deadbeat cop, murderer, drug dealing cop, just because you didn't like what Clay said? It's like, this is the ultimate. For me, it's just the ultimate anti-intellectual argument. You're judging the messenger rather than hearing what he had to say. This is a guy that didn't have. It's not like he was, a rival drug dealer to Targ. It's not like he was running for, judgeship. He wasn't trying to be a politician. He
was coaching men's basketball. That's what he did in his free time, and did the show.
Yeah, an avid swimmer, and for that guy, I don't know, to be completely maligned. And you'll see when we show you guys more tapes and that kind of stuff, is really disgusting. And even in the modern, in today, other podcasters, and we're going to do an episode on this too. There was one podcaster in particular that you showed me. And what did he say about Clay?
To paraphrase it, they said Clay was probably the type of person whose ancestors would have owned slaves.
Which is insane. You guys have been with us for 4 or 5 episodes now. This guy that talks about, in an hour episode, 20 minutes on minorities getting beaten, civil rights, the unfairness of the justice system. What a disgusting thing to say, that he would have been a slave owner. That is an insane thing to say, And it's not just that one podcast. There was other podcasts that was recorded the last few years.
Yeah.
Ridiculous, insane, Anyway, I think that kind of wraps up this episode. So that was 59. We took a little time to record this one because I think in the last episode we mentioned our process. We need a little bit of time to develop a backlog so that we're not rushing to release stuff. We're learning a lot about our workflow and our process now, and the research that we do into these shows is the most important, and it takes a little bit of time. So we want to thank you guys for sticking with us. The audience is growing, which we appreciate, but really, I think the most important thing is to deliver the best product we can for Clay and for his legacy, right?
Exactly. We're just going to continue doing the good work, and I think we'll probably see you guys next week when we put out another episode. And please remember to like and subscribe. It helps a lot.
Absolutely, yeah. Sharing it with your friends, it gives us a lot more exposure. Ultimately, we want to be able to grow the channel to the point where we can start doing research on other parts of his story. Also, a lot of this stuff needs professional. I don't know how to phrase this. There's a lot of stuff, engineers-wise, that goes into these tapes. Even though they're in great condition, if you play them once, they deteriorate. So we only play them when we absolutely have to get the material off of it. To redigitize them is an expensive process. So we've been going through the ups and downs of figuring out how to do this the best way that doesn't bankrupt us. But guys, thanks so much for watching. We'll see you in a week, and thank you for your support.
Thank you. Good night. Bye.
Good night.